Sometimes you win the offseason in the NFL and it translates in the win-loss column. And sometimes you don't. There is no question that one of the most active teams this offseason free agency period in the NFL has to be the Los Angeles Rams. Trading Alec Ogletree, trading for Marcus Peters, trading for Aqib Talib, and their most recent move, the signing of Ndamukong to a one-year, $13 or $14 million contract. You have to give the Rams credit for this. They're being aggressive. They got a taste of the playoffs last year. They got a taste of success. They realize that the division that they're in, the NFC West, is in a period of real tumult and turnover where it's not so much about the Seahawks and the Cardinals as it has been the past couple of years. It's going to be about the Rams, and here come the 49ers. They're coming too. So there's a changing of the guard there. And the Rams know that while you've got a young core, you've got Jared Goff, you've got Todd Gurley, an improved offensive line, you got guys at wide receiver like Cooper Kupp and Robert Woods, you know that nothing is guaranteed from one year to the next. And the fact is you did lose a wild card round playoff game at home to the Falcons. So you know you're not there. And rightfully so, General Manager Les Snead and the Rams front office understands that based off of the construction of the current team that they had, they weren't quite ready for prime time and they weren't quite Super Bowl champions. They may have potentially at some point a Super Bowl worthy head coach in Sean McVay. They have clearly a Super Bowl worthy defensive coordinator in Wade Phillips. You've got Aaron Donald on that defense, and how much does that help? I mean, let's be honest. But they didn't have enough. So they've been aggressive. And when you look at the deals for Peters and Talib, they're not that incredibly expensive in the grand scheme of things. And for a team like them that made the playoffs last year, that has a solid young core nucleus in place with Goff and Gurley and Donald on the defensive end, you sit there and you say, okay, we're at a position where we can take these gambles and we can take these chances and make these risky moves because the cost isn't incredible, but the payoff could potentially be astronomical. And when you think about having a Talib and a Peters on the outside, you've gotten massively better at the corner position in that secondary, even with losing a Trumaine Johnson in free agency. You have upgraded there. You most certainly have, for less money, in theory, than you would have had to pay Trumaine Johnson this year to keep him, or close to it. And then you bring a guy like Ndamukong into the mix, who got the money and ran down to Miami, which Florida, no state income tax, so on and so forth, makes some sense. But Sue hasn't been that same Sue the past couple of seasons, and there's a variety of different factors for that. But now you bring in Sue, who's still in what should be the peak of his career, even going into, year 9 in the NFL? He's still a big guy, so you feel like those guys sometimes don't wear down as quickly. Their games might change and have to evolve, but he's still at the tail end, I would say at least, of the prime of his career. He's a guy that's been disruptive. He's been a guy that's shown the ability to be dominant in the league at times. Now you bring him into a situation where you line him up on the same defensive line as Aaron Donald? Even if you say Ndamukong Suh's primarily always played in the 4-3 and he's coming to Wade Phillips in an entirely different system, a different setup in the 3-4, is he going to play a 5 technique? Is he going to be a nose? Or are you going to do some hybrid stuff and utilize him and Donald inside in cover 2 type of formations? I mean, there are a lot of possibilities there of what you could do with Suh. And even though he hasn't really played in the 3-4 much in his career at all, or really not at all, you feel like you could take that type of talent and put it in there and it fits and it works and you'll figure out a way to do it, in part because you'll want to get him on the same defensive line as Aaron Damn Donald. And with it being a one-year deal, if it works, great. And if it doesn't, then it costs you a bunch of money, yes, but long-term it didn't cost you that much. You didn't have to give up a ton of picks to get him. You didn't sink 3 years of guaranteed money into him. So it's, outside of the financial aspect of it, a relatively low-risk, potentially decent to high-reward situation. My one concern for the Rams, and with sometimes teams in the offseason making these big moves for these big notable free agents making these trades for big name players is that these things don't always work out. See the Philadelphia Eagles dream team of the early part of this decade. What did they finish in those 2 years of the dream team? 8-8 and 4-12, and then Andy Reid was shown the door? You have to be careful trying to build primarily through trades and free agency. My Bears did that with Phil Emery as the general manager and Mark Trestman as the head coach, and that was an epic disaster. And got them to the point where they had to do a total and complete rebuild. Sometimes it does work, and I imagine the Rams organization, their powers that be, the brain trust, the front office are looking at this, and they're saying, we've got a young core in place, similar to Philadelphia. So what they did, combination of getting guys in the draft, getting guys via trades, getting guys via free agency, we can build our team in a similar way. The Broncos a couple of years ago, as John Elway said, primarily won the Super Bowl through free agency. And that's not necessarily inaccurate at all, because you could say definitely that they did. Previously, the Peyton Manning signings, bringing guys like Emmanuel Sanders and T.J. Ward and so on and so forth. So they definitely were aggressive in the space in free agency. And it ultimately paid off in a Lombardi trophy, even with Peyton Manning being clearly done as a player. But you have to be careful sometimes, because you got to ask yourself, why were the Chiefs so ready to get rid of a guy they had just a few years before spent a first-round pick on, Marcus Peters? Why were the Broncos so ready to get rid of a guy who's so versatile at the corner position in Aqib Talib, in a sense that he can defend tight ends, he can defend guys outside at the wide receiver position? Why were the Dolphins, you could take the salary cap stuff and kick that for a second, because it's not just about that. Because if he was really worth it for the Dolphins, they would have found a way, you would think, to rework it and keep him, and they didn't. Now Ndamukong Suh comes available. And these are all three guys you're talking about that bring some baggage. Peters has had his moments. We all know that Aqib Talib has had his moments, and most certainly Ndamukong Suh has had his moments. And before people want to sit there and be all giddy because of these trades and the names that they acquired, keep in mind the Rams just made a big trade last year for Sammy Watkins, and that worked out so well they allowed him to leave in free agency and go to the Chiefs. So just because it's a big name, and even if you didn't give up a ton to get him, is no way guarantee that it's really going to work out big. Because it might not. But you bring these veterans in, Peters, who's never played in Wade Phillips' system, Suh, who's never played in Wade Phillips' system, the one guy that has is Talib. There's no guarantee that they mesh well in that system. There's no guarantee it's a perfect fit. There's no guarantee that they're able to play well under Wade Phillips, that Wade Phillips is able to get the most out of them. And now you're starting to bring all these volatile on-field and in the locker room personalities into the fold. You got to be really, really careful that you're not kicking the can one too many times here. Because, I mean, Talib, Peters, Suh, they've all had documented incidents, and we know them. They're out there. They're verifiable. It's not just rumor. It is documented fact. And if things go sideways at first or things go south at all initially, could you run into a situation where they're sniping, they're bickering, they're doing this stupid crap, and really impacting the team overall? Yes, how the Eagles did it could work. But it's also funny that it ultimately worked because once Carson Wentz went down and tore his ACL and was out for the rest of the season, Nick Foles eventually got into a rhythm in the playoffs, got really hot at the right time, and in my opinion, still, I don't care what anybody says, outplayed Tom Brady in the Super Bowl when it mattered most, and the Eagles were able to win the Super Bowl that way. So even then, they got damn lucky. I just always am cautious of teams that go out and try to win the offseason and try to make these big splashy plays for established veterans. Now, if you're the Rams, I understand wanting to do it, because how much are those draft picks really going to help you right now? You can either take those draft picks and spend them on players that could make an impact now, but hopefully make an impact down the road at least, or you can take some of those picks and use them and turn them into established guys like Peters, like Talib. You could take some of that cap space that you have, and you could sign a guy like Ndamukong Suh. I'm just saying we shouldn't crown their asses just yet, because they'll face a little bit of a tougher schedule in 2018. Will the league catch on to what they were doing offensively a little bit? We've got to see how specifically Peters and Suh are going to fit into this defense. How much does Aqib Talib still have left in the tank? To me, there are a lot of questions. So I don't knock the Ndamukong Suh signing, because again, it was for 1 year. A lot of money, but still only 1 year. And if he's right and he fits, then him and Donald on that same defensive line is absolutely scary. And now you're talking about with Peters and Talib, that probably makes things even easier for them back there. Now you're talking about a very scary Rams defense that could be borderline Super Bowl worthy. But that's a lot of ifs. A lot of ifs with absolutely no guarantees that any of this works. For all you know, Sue could get hurt and miss most of the year. Talib, Peters, same thing. All of them potentially. Then what do you got to show for it? I don't knock any of the moves individually, because I can make arguments for all of them, and they all make sense. Just you have to be really careful that you don't go too free agent, too veteran trade happy and heavy, because especially, like I said, if it goes sideways early, these guys were allowed to move on or moved on for reasons. And if you're not careful, you'll find out those reasons very early on in that season, and then you could have a real problem on your hands. It's all about trying to balance building for the future and the long term versus you've got a taste of success and you think you're ready to go for it now. Clearly the Rams think they can go for it now. And again, I applaud the aggressiveness and believing in the team, but saying, hey, we need to get better. And if we get better, we feel like we can win it all. Just don't crown them just yet. And don't be surprised when this ultimately doesn't lead to a trip to the Super Bowl this upcoming season.